He thought the raging bull was chasing him, a terrifying beast bent on harm. But he was wrong. The bull was leading him to his missing brother. What happens next will leave you speechless. The ground shook beneath Jace Calder's boots. Each step hammered into the dry soil as if the earth itself was trying to throw him off balance. Behind him, the thunder of hooves grew louder, closer, a deep, pounding rhythm that seemed to vibrate through his chest. The hot breath of the animal carried on the wind, mingling with the dust that burned in his throat. His muscles screamed for relief, but the moment he slowed, he knew he'd be caught. The bull was closing in. The massive black shape filled the corner of his vision, cutting through the shimmering heat of the late afternoon. It didn't roar or bellow in mindless rage. It ran with uncanny focus, head low, nostrils flaring, dark eyes locked on him. Each powerful stride brought it nearer, yet its movement felt too measured, too deliberate, to be wild chaos. This wasn't a random charge. Jace's mind raced almost as fast as his legs. He had no weapon, no rope, nothing but the fence pliers still clipped to his belt from earlier repairs. Not much use against a beast this size. He couldn't outpace it on open ground, but maybe he could outthink it. The problem was, he had no idea why it was chasing him in the first place. Just an hour ago, he had been near the old Milford barn, replacing warped boards on a sagging stretch of fence. He remembered looking up and spotting it, a bull unlike any he'd seen before, standing just inside the tree line. It hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound. It had simply watched him, the muscles in its neck taut, its massive frame half hidden by shadow. The air between them had been still, heavy, as if something unseen passed from the animal to him. Then, without warning, it had turned and walked away. He should have taken it as a sign to be cautious. Instead, he'd gone back to work, brushing it off as an odd encounter. Now, his heart hammered against his ribs, the memory clashing with the reality of the chase. Ahead, the land rose sharply, ending in a jagged wall of rock, a place he knew well from years of riding these pastures. It wasn't a way out, it was a trap. But the bull's angle was pushing him there, cutting him off from the dirt track that wound toward the main road. He tried veering left, hoping to slip past, but the bull adjusted instantly, its hooves churning up dry earth in a quick, precise arc. It was hurting him. The realization sent a jolt through him, not fear exactly, but a sharp spike of confusion. Why hurt him? What possible purpose could this serve? The slope was steeper than he remembered, the rocks looming closer with every stride. His breath came in ragged bursts, his shirt clinging to his back with sweat. He risked a glance over his shoulder and saw the bull closing the last few yards, its broad chest heaving, the sheen of its dark coat glistening in the sun. "Come on, Jace, move," he muttered to himself, teeth clenched as he pushed harder. His boots struck loose gravel at the base of the rock face, almost sending him sprawling. He scrambled toward a narrow ledge, his hands gripping at warm stone for balance. Behind him, the bull slowed, not from exhaustion, but as if it had reached the point it wanted all along. It stopped just short of ramming the rocks, its massive head tilting slightly as it fixed him with an unblinking stare. The silence that followed was almost unnatural. No sound of wind through the grass, no rustle of distant birds, just Jace's labored breathing and the slow, deliberate huff of the bull. Its eyes shifted, not to him, but to something else. Jace followed the line of its gaze and saw it, a narrow shadow between two boulders. At first glance, it was nothing more than a trick of light, but the longer he looked, the clearer it became. An opening, small enough to go unnoticed from a distance, tucked between the jagged stones. The bull let out a low, deliberate bellow. Not the frenzied roar of an animal in attack, but a sound heavy with intent. It rumbled through the air like a warning, or a signal. Ace's pulse slowed, replaced by an unease deeper than the chase itself. He didn't know why, but the thought came unbidden. It's showing me something. That idea should have been absurd. Yet as he clung to the ledge, his chest rising and falling, he couldn't shake the feeling that every step of the chase had been designed to bring him right here, to this exact spot, in front of that shadowed opening. He didn't know what lay beyond the dark slit in the rocks, but part of him, the same part that had been driving him for 3 days to search every corner of Marrowbend Valley, was already telling him he might have no choice but to find out. Jace froze. It wasn't random. Its eyes flicked toward a shadowed opening between the rocks. It was almost as if it was showing him something. Jace crouched low on the ledge, his chest still rising and falling from the sprint, the metallic taste of dust and sweat coating his mouth. The bull stood below, its bulk framed against the fading glow of the horizon. It didn't move to charge again. Instead, it took 2 slow steps backward, the muscles along its shoulders shifting like rolling hills under its hide. Its dark eyes didn't leave him. They held a strange weight, almost like expectation. Jace's gaze shifted to the place where its head had angled moments before, a slit between two leaning boulders. From where he sat, it seemed barely large enough for a man to pass through sideways. The shadows pooled thick inside, the kind that seemed to swallow light whole. His instincts tightened in protest. Holes in rock weren't just hiding spots, they could be traps. Still, another thought pressed through. What if Elias had come this way? He could picture his younger brother as if it were yesterday. Lanky frame, restless hands, eyes always darting toward anything unusual. Elias had a way of finding trouble simply by being curious enough to look for it. Jace could hear his father's voice in his memory. That boy will follow a sound into the mouth of a wolf. And the canyon ridge where Elias was last seen wasn't far from here. The bull's tail swished once. It let out a short, low snort and held its ground. Jace slid down from the ledge, the soles of his boots scraping against the rock. Pebbles tumbled away into the dry grass. He approached slowly, his movements deliberate, like a man trying not to spook a wary animal. The bull didn't lunge or circle. It simply watched, head tilting slightly as he neared the opening. He stopped at the mouth of the gap. Cool, damp air brushed against his face, carrying with it a faint scent that made him pause. Smoke. Old, but still there, woven into the stone like it had clung for hours, maybe days. His fingers brushed the rough surface of the rock as he leaned forward, squinting into the gloom. The entrance was narrow at first, barely wide enough for his shoulders, but beyond that, the darkness seemed to widen into something more. Jace glanced once more at the bull. "You're not going to follow me, are you?" he muttered under his breath. The animal blinked slowly, then lowered its head, not in threat, but almost in dismissal. He took a breath and stepped in. The sound of the outside world muffled instantly, as though a heavy curtain had fallen behind him. Each step was careful, his boots finding purchase on uneven stone slick with faint moisture. The air was cooler here, almost clammy, and the smell of smoke grew stronger. The narrow corridor opened suddenly into a hollowed-out cavern. A thin shaft of moonlight spilled in from a crack high above, cutting a pale stripe across the dirt floor. The space was larger than he expected, its walls jagged and glistening faintly where water had seeped through. And there, lying half in shadow on the far side, was an object that made his pulse leap, a canteen. He crossed the cavern quickly, his steps echoing softly against the walls. The canteen was dented along one side, its metal scratched and worn, but he knew it instantly. It was Elias's, the same one he had carried since he was 16. Jace turned it over in his hand, a knot tightening in his chest. His brother had been here. Before relief could settle in, a sound froze him where he stood. A faint shuffle of movement came from deeper inside the cavern, beyond the edge of the moonlight. He straightened slowly, straining to listen. The sound came again, footsteps dragging lightly against stone, followed by a voice. "Help!" It was quiet, hoarse, but unmistakable. "Elias?" Jace's voice cracked slightly, urgency lacing the single word. "Jace?" The reply was weak, almost breathless. "Is that you?" Jace didn't waste a second. He moved toward the sound, the shadows deepening around him. Just as he rounded a curve in the wall, his path came to an abrupt stop. A crude barricade of wooden planks, tied together with frayed rope, had been wedged between two boulders, sealing off the passage. He gripped one of the boards and pulled hard, but it didn't budge. Whoever had put this together had done so recently. The rope was taut, the knot solid. His frustration built with each failed tug. "Hold on, Elias, I'm going to get you out," he called, his voice firm but edged with worry. From the other side came the faint scrape of movement. They won't let me go," Elias whispered. Jace froze, the words settling in like cold water. "Who?" he asked, but before the answer came, another sound reached him, a different set of footsteps. He could tell instantly these didn't belong to Elias. The stride was heavier, more deliberate. Boots on stone. The steps grew louder, closer. A shadow flickered in the dim light, moving along the wall toward him. The weight in Jace's chest deepened into something sharper. He stepped back from the barricade, eyes scanning for anything he could use as a weapon. Whoever had trapped his brother was still here. And if the bull had led him here on purpose, it meant there was far more to this chase than Jace could have guessed. Jace pressed his back against the cold cavern wall, the uneven stone digging into his shoulders. The air was damp and close, carrying the faint tang of smoke and sweat. Every muscle in his body was locked, his breath shallow as he strained to catch each sound from deeper in the tunnel. Then he heard them, two men's voices drifting from the shadows ahead. Their words were low, edged with irritation. "Told you we moved the kid tonight," one hissed. "And I told you it's too risky in the dark," the other replied. "Wait until morning." Jace's gut twisted. The kid wasn't just some traveler. They were talking about Elias. This wasn't a rescue anymore. This was a snatch and hide. His brother hadn't wandered into trouble. He'd been dragged into it. Jace's hand went instinctively to his belt, fingers closing around the folding knife he always carried. It was small, meant for cutting rope or opening feed sacks, but now it felt heavier, more dangerous in his grip. He ran through his options. A direct rush might give him the element of surprise, but if he misstepped, one of them could harm Elias before he even got close. Waiting could mean losing the moment entirely. They might move Elias somewhere he'd never find again. Then it came, faint at first, but so deep it seemed to reverberate through the rock. A long, resonant bellow from outside the cavern. The bull. The voices ahead reacted instantly. One man's tone sharpened. "What was that?" "Don't know," the other muttered, but there was unease in his voice. The bellow sounded again, louder this time. Stone dust drifted from a crack above Jace's head, shaken loose by the vibration. The men's low tones turned to quick exchanges, one of them cursing under his breath. Footsteps echoed, the heavier tread of one man moving toward the entrance. "Check it out," the first ordered. "You're not coming?" the second snapped. "I'll keep watch here. Just go." The boots faded toward the mouth of the cavern. That left one man inside, guarding Elias. Jace's pulse quickened. The bull's appearance wasn't just strange anymore, it was timely. Deliberate. It was disrupting whatever these men had planned. That thought was strange enough to make his skin prickle, but he shoved the questions aside. He had seconds, maybe less, to act. Staying low, he slipped along the wall, hugging the shadows. The rough stone snagged at his shirt as he edged around a jutting slab. His eyes adjusted to the gloom, shapes becoming clearer. The guard stood with his back to Jace, tall and broad-shouldered, gripping a crude club fashioned from a length of wood with a thick knot at one end. He shifted his weight lazily, glancing toward the barricade where Elias was hidden. Jace didn't hesitate. He launched forward, wrapping one arm around the man's chest while his other hand drove the knife's handle into the back of the man's knee. The guard stumbled with a grunt, the club clattering to the ground. They hit the dirt hard, rolling once. Jace pinned him, slamming his forearm against the man's throat. The guard clawed at him, but the fight was clumsy. He was caught off guard, and Jace's determination was a weight all its own. Within moments, the man's resistance slowed, his eyes rolling back as he went limp. Jace shoved him aside, breathing hard. The echo of the struggle seemed to hang in the cavern for a heartbeat before fading. He grabbed the club and turned to the barricade. The planks groaned as he pulled at them, the rope biting into his palms. One knot gave, then another, until the makeshift wall collapsed inward with a crash. Elias stumbled out, his face pale, clothes dirt-stained. His eyes widened when he saw Jace. "You found me." His voice was raw, barely above a whisper. "Come on," Jace said, gripping his brother's arm to steady him. "We're not safe yet." Before Elias could answer, a shout erupted from the tunnel mouth. The other man had returned. The sound bounced off the walls, carrying anger and alarm. Then the bull's bellow tore through the air again, this time so close it rattled the cavern floor. The shout turned into a startled cry, followed by the unmistakable pounding of hooves. The ground trembled beneath them. "What's—" Elias began, but the rest of his question was drowned out by a heavy crash from outside, the sound of something, or someone, slamming into rock. A sharp scream split the air, high with fear, and then silence. Jace didn't stop to wonder. He pulled Elias toward the narrow passage they'd come through. As they stepped into the pale light from the cavern's mouth, the bull stood there, blocking the way back to the open field. Its massive frame filled the gap, head held high, muscles shifting with each measured breath. It didn't lower its horns. It didn't move to charge. Instead, it turned slowly, the great arc of its neck deliberate, and began to walk, not away from them, but toward the winding path that led deeper toward the canyon trail. Then, without aggression, it turned and began walking toward the canyon trail, leading them again. Jace couldn't stop thinking about the bull. Even as the lawmen from Orvale led the unconscious captor out of the canyon and down toward town, the animal had already vanished, melting into the rugged hills like a shadow swallowed by the evening light. It hadn't waited for thanks, hadn't even looked back. One moment it was there, the next, nothing but the soft scuff of disturbed dirt where its hooves had been. The absence left a strange hollowness in Jace, as though the air itself had shifted. Elias leaned heavily on him as they made their way to the waiting wagon. His younger brother's steps were slow, unsteady from exhaustion. The sheriff, a tall man with weathered features named Bram Orley, met them halfway. "We'll get your brother home," Bram said, his tone steady but edged with curiosity. His gaze lingered on the trail behind them, where no tracks led into the canyon except for their own, and a faint, wide set of hoofprints. Later, back at the small cabin on the edge of Marrowbend Valley, Elias lay in bed wrapped in blankets, sipping water. His voice was still rough, but he insisted on telling Jace what had happened. "They caught me while I was tracking hoofprints up near the ridge," Elias said, eyes fixed on the ceiling as though seeing the moment again. "I thought it was just some lost ranch animal. The prints were big, wider than any bull I've seen, and deep, like the ground itself shifted under its weight." Jace sat in the chair beside him, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "You saw it before they took you?" Elias nodded slowly. "Once, from a distance. It just stood there, half hidden by the brush. Didn't charge, didn't run, just watched. Later that night, when they tried to move me from the cavern, it was nearby. I could hear it. Every time it bellowed, they'd get spooked and stop." He swallowed, his throat still raw. "I think it was keeping me from being moved too far." Jace didn't speak right away. He thought back to the way the bull had appeared at exactly the right moment, how it had drawn him toward the cavern. "You're sure it wasn't someone's animal? Strayed from a ranch?" "There was no brand," Elias said firmly. "I looked. No rope scars, no tag, nothing. When Bram returned the next morning, he brought news that only deepened the mystery. We searched the area," he told them, standing in the cabin doorway with his hat in his hands. "No sign of an owner. No one in Orval or the surrounding farms is missing stock. A creature that size doesn't just wander unnoticed. And those tracks—" He shook his head. "They lead nowhere. Past a certain point, they just stop." Jace exchanged a glance with Elias. Neither spoke, but the unspoken thought hung between them like mist. This was no ordinary animal. In the weeks that followed, the story spread. First in hushed tones over tavern tables in Orval, then in louder voices at the market. Some called it the guardian bull of Marrowbend Valley, a creature that appeared only when someone was in danger. Others dismissed it as a tall tale, the kind of thing folks invented to make a simple rescue sound grander. But even the skeptics couldn't explain the details, the timing, the unbranded hide, the tracks that ended in bare ground. Jace didn't put much stock in legends. He'd always believed in what he could see, hear, or touch. But this was harder to dismiss. He replayed the moments over and over in his mind. The first distant bellow, the sudden way the captor's plans had unraveled, the way the bull had waited at the cavern mouth as if to guide them. It didn't feel like luck. One afternoon, as Jace and Elias repaired a section of fence on the far side of their property, Elias leaned on the post driver and said, "You think it's still out there?" Jace paused, gripping the top rail. "Maybe. Or maybe it was just passing through." "I don't think so," Elias said, his voice certain. "It knew where I was. It knew when to act." Jace didn't answer. He didn't want to admit how often he'd looked toward the hills, scanning for a dark shape against the scrub. Every creak of the fence posts in the wind, every distant rumble of hooves from passing herds made his pulse quicken before reason caught up. The sheriff's men had eventually taken the captured outlaw to Orvale's holding cells. Under questioning, the man claimed not to know anything about the bull. "We heard it," he'd told Bram. "Scared the life out of us. Never saw it, though. Thought it was a ghost at first." That word, ghost, stuck with Jace. He didn't believe in spirits, but there was something undeniably haunting about the way the bull had come and gone. It had acted with purpose, not instinct. As the season turned and the air grew cooler, Jace rode the canyon trail more often. Sometimes he told himself it was to check for signs of the outlaw's return. Other times he didn't bother making excuses. He was searching. But the bull never appeared again. Still, each time he passed the place where the narrow trail curved and the rocks rose high on either side, Jace felt it. That subtle prickle along the back of his neck, the sense of unseen eyes watching from the ridge. It wasn't fear. It was something quieter, steadier, a presence. He thought about how help didn't always look the way you expected. It didn't always arrive on horseback, or with a badge, or even with human words. Sometimes, it arrived with thunder in its step, a shadow in the dust, and a low, steady bellow that led you exactly where you needed to go. And though Jace never saw the bull again, every time he passed the canyon trail, he felt a presence in the hills, watching, waiting, just in case it was needed again. Disclaimer. The story you just watched is fictional. It explores powerful themes of misjudgment, unexpected guidance, and the profound bonds that can exist between humans and animals. This narrative aims to highlight that what we perceive as danger can sometimes be a path to rescue, and that a true friend can be found in the most unlikely of places.